Hi there, this is Haley with Bygone Blooms, and in today's video I wanted to talk about a couple of early bloomers that you can plan for your garden and expect blooms in early spring, if not even still when you have snow on the ground. So the earliest bloomer that I know of that has an actual bloom is a hellebore or a Lenten rose. I planted 3 of these today. I got them at Lowe's. You could get them at big box stores or at nurseries. They are a little bit expensive, but they are a almost like a vintage flower. They're long-lasting, perennial. They're a semi-evergreen or mostly evergreen depending on how cold your winters get, and like I said, they bloom super early. So what I've read online says that they can bloom from anywhere from November all the way through spring. So here in our area, I'm hoping that they will bloom in like January maybe, or February, when we still maybe have snow on the ground, but we're looking for something that's a little bit bright and kind of warms up the landscape. So Lenten roses or hellebores can last over a week in the vase if you pick them at the right time or cut them at the right time. If you cut them like I have a picture of where some of the flowers, at least one on the stem, has already been pollinated and is forming a seed pod, then those are optimal for extra vase life. So make sure when you're cutting them that you're looking for that one spent bloom almost, but they'll last over a week. Some people even say up to 2 weeks in the vase at that time. One thing to consider is that these are, in addition to being a perennial and a semi-evergreen, these work really well in shady areas. So they're often grown or found growing in like the woods or the side of a really shady spot under trees maybe. You could plant them under the edge of your property if you have a wooded area. Where I chose to plant them today is next to my front porch. This is an area that because it's kind of in the corner and it's shaded by our awning, or our porch, I guess, it gets quite a lot of shade. So there's just a little bit of shade in the afternoon, just barely as the sun's going down, and that should be good. The plant tag said 4 to 6 hours of morning sun. In my case, it'll be less than that. Part of it will be afternoon sun, but it's kind of dappled by the other things that are around. One thing to consider when you're planting hellebores is that they really like well-draining soil, rich soil. In our area, we have clay soil, heavy soil, and you can tell even just when I'm digging the plants into the ground that we have lots of rocks. I'm hoping to make sure to not overwater these, and what I've read says once they're established that you can water them about once a week. So that's my goal. You'll notice that I have drip irrigation run, and I'm planning on putting these on drip, but not running it super frequently. Hopefully I'll run it maybe a couple times a week in the heat of the summer, but run it for longer periods of time. And that's my preference, rather than running it every day for a short amount of time. I'd rather train roots to grow down deep to get water rather than just be on the surface. So I'm really excited to grow hellebores this year because of the early blooms and because of the brightness that they add to the landscape when everything else is brown and yucky. One thing to keep in mind is that the blooms of hellebores often point down. So if you're picking them, or if they're in the landscape, you'll want to pick a type of hellebore that you like the color of, even if you can only see the back. It is also common for different plants to have different colors on the same plant. So you may have multiple different bloom types on the same plant. And if you have different types of hellebores in an area together, they'll cross-pollinate and you'll have new blooms the following years. It's also really common that these naturalize, so if you can get a patch of them started, they should spread and you'll have them for years to come. So I'm really excited to add these to my garden. My next early bloomer is daffodils, and I have a lot of experience with these. They grow wild here along the woods on the side of the road. Lots of people have them in their yards, and I've gotten a few rounds of daffodils. I've got some from big box stores, I've ordered some from Eden Brothers, and I've had success with them. Daffodils are another thing that is fairly long lasting in the vase. I've gotten over a week in the vase when I cut them at the proper time. Before they're like super open, if the back of the daffodil is papery, then it's probably too late to have good vase life. The goal when you're picking daffodils is that they're just barely starting to crack open, especially with the single layer of petals. You just want to barely see them opening up. If you have daffodils that are double layer petals, you'll want to see just the first hint of the inside petals so they should still be fairly closed, but just starting to crack open when you're picking them. And this will make sure that you have the longest vase life. With daffodils, you can use them in arrangements with other flowers as long as you condition them first. So I would recommend that you have them on their own in their own clean water for at least a couple hours, because they exude a sap that can kill other plants and other things that you've cut. But once you condition them, once you have them in their own clean water so that the sap can drain out and everything's good, then you can go ahead and use daffodils in mixed arrangements as well. One thing to consider with that sap is that it can be irritating to your skin, and daffodils and hellebores both are toxic if you eat them, so make sure if you have small children or pets that you watch for that, because you wouldn't want anybody getting sick. But I haven't had an issue with the sap of daffodils. You can always wear garden gloves. I don't. I just try not to get sap all over me. So when you cut them, sometimes it almost looks like there's like liquidy, thick substance coming out, almost like they're dripping water. As long as you just let that drip out and you don't get it all over your hands, you should be okay. One thing I really like about daffodils that is kind of similar to hellebores is that they naturalize. So you can start out with maybe 50 daffodils, and then in the coming years you'll end up with hundreds. They spread really nicely, and they like to kind of take over an area. So when I plant daffodils, I just plant them maybe like 10 or 15 at a time, dotted throughout my garden. Daffodils are one that likes full sun. You'll notice that it's the same flower bed that I have my Lenten roses or my hellebores and my daffodils in. They just have different amounts of sun throughout the day. So where I have my daffodils, the ones that are blooming first, and it's the first week of March, we already have blooms. Last year we had blooms around March 15th, so we're a couple weeks early. But the daffodils that are blooming first are the ones that have the most exposure to sunlight. And you can tell if you're driving along in our area, there are daffodils that are in more full sun areas that are already blooming along the roadside or in people's landscape. So one thing to consider, if you are used to the old style like jonquil daffodils, my grandma would call them jonquils. Those are just kind of your standard yellow, solid yellow daffodil. And those are beautiful. I have quite a few of them. They're fairly cheap to buy, but there's also nice versions that are all white. There's ones that are smaller and have multiple heads on each stem. There's ruffly daffodils that maybe are like pink in the middle and then yellow on the outside, or maybe pink and white. There's double layer daffodils that are really beautiful. So if you are interested in a bulb that is something that will last year after year, daffodils do really well when you cut them with coming back. Bulbs like tulips and things like that, when you cut them, they aren't as reliable coming back as daffodils are. And a lot of people pull tulip bulbs all the way out of the ground if they're using them for cuts, just for the stem length. But daffodils are one that if you can get them to be tall enough, which I've found it works pretty well for me, I can cut them off just at ground level, and I don't cut any leaves or anything with them, so that they're able to get energy, soak up that energy through their leaves for the next year. But I'm hoping to have my daffodils spread even more this year, and excited. It always just makes me so happy that I have my first blooms, and I love that they're a sunny yellow. And I found that the yellow, like plain yellow daffodils, tend to emerge first, and then the more specialty types are after those. But that works really well for me when I'm cutting, because I don't want all 200 of my daffodils to be blooming at the exact same time. It helps for me to spread them out a little bit so that I have enough for a couple of arrangements every week. So those are some of the things that I would recommend if you're looking for really early blooms. And both Lenten roses or hellebores and daffodils come back year after year, and they add a lot of interest to your landscape if you're growing them, but they also work really well cut in the vase. So thank you so much for growing with me, and I'll see you guys in the next one.